My name is Eric Alexander. I'm Executive Director of the Brigham Education Institute, and it's a real pleasure to just provide some opening comments and introduce this fun session we have again. It's the second in our series we're focusing on, which is related to peer review and doing it well within the world of medical education, literature, and research. We have had a lot of fun putting this together. Kristina Dzara had designed this series, really trying to grow this important skill set of peer reviewing medical education. Two of my good colleagues here within the BEI, Kristina Dzara and Subha Ramani, are outstanding medical educators and very academic in terms of their pursuits and are experts in terms of thinking about published research in the field of medical education research and also how to think about it from a journal's perspective. So this is going to be very fun because it's really hands-on. I won't steal the thunder here, but I just want to thank them both, and I'll turn it over right now to Kristina to launch us forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. And just a reminder for all those BEI events, everyone's interested, everyone's welcome. So please do join us for the events that Eric just mentioned. Well, I am excited for this session today. And one of the things I would just like to make sure everyone here knows is that this will be an engaging session. We're going to put you in breakout rooms. We're going to get you actively working on a peer review in a live setting. And so please be prepared to engage in your groups and be part of this learning experience today. And my real goal for all of us in designing this whole series is that we could open that black box for you, right? For many, being a peer reviewer, experiencing peer review, doing a peer review, or responding to a peer review as an author is something that feels foreign, confusing, scary, overwhelming. And so my goal really was to make sure that as members of our BEI community, you felt empowered to open that black box, understand what's inside it, so that when you are asked a peer review or when you have to respond to peer review, because you've written a paper that is going to be published in a journal, that you are adequately enabled to do this. And that is what all three of these sessions are about. Now, what is peer review? We already covered this in the first session, but really we're thinking about a way of almost crowdsourcing, if you will, because we're bringing together multiple opinions from multiple people, including editors, possibly associate editors, and the reviewers who read a paper, an evaluation of what the paper consists of for competence, significance, and originality, right? So really trying to make a point of, is this paper worth publishing? And there is a value judgment there about the contribution of the work to scholarship, to the field. But bigger picture too, and we'll focus a bit on this today, is that you can really grow as an educator, you can grow as a scholar, because it is an opportunity for you to sort of immerse yourself in the culture of the field. When you read these papers, you see how other people write, how other people think, and what sort of research or scholarship is coming out next. So engaging in that deliberate practice, doing that labor, is something that can be very helpful for you over the course of your career. And so with that, I'm going to hand off to Subha, who's going to share 7 tips for peer review success. Subha.
Thank you, Kristina. Actually, Kristina was leading this series and organizing this series independently from me as I was organizing the medical education cafes. And it just coincidentally turned out that Aileen Barrett, the editor-in-chief of the Clinical Teacher, is going to be the expert discussant on the next Global Med Cafe. Now, why? And we deliberately today chose a paper that was published or submitted to the Clinical Teacher. And also because we are amongst educators, we want to emphasize that research is one form of scholarship, but there are many other forms of scholarship. And this is going to come up in the Global Med Cafe as well. But with that, this came out of a paper, the 12 tips paper that I co-authored with Sami Azer from Australia and now I think Saudi Arabia. And we chose some of the tips. Kristina finalized like the highest yield tips. The first tip is be honest in self-appraisal. So recognize your own expertise or lack of expertise on the topic. And it's perfectly fine to go and seek somebody to guide you. Consider your understanding of the methodology. And I will say that there have been times I've been called upon to peer review if the statistical method or the research methodology is not familiar. I would say that and then say, could you please have somebody look at this statistical analysis? And that's fine. Editors do that. Appraise your knowledge of the journal So who's the readership of this journal? What's their audience? And what is the format? And in fact, we ourselves have received reviews that were discordant with the type of format we were submitting for. Next, please. So the second tip, acknowledge your own biases. Most of the time, you're called upon to peer review on a topic that actually is you have a passion for. Therefore, you have opinions, you have biases, you have assumptions. And so it's not, you can't chop off your biases or your assumptions, but know them and keep them to the side and review and have some neutrality when you do a peer review. It is natural to have biases, but it's because you have, this is maybe your area of expertise or passion, but then look for the problem, gap, and hook within the author's storyline. Most educational papers, research and non-research papers, are telling a scientific story. So the story has to come from the authors. It's not your story. Next, please. So no point in saying, oh, this was a great manuscript, because, and then giving about 25 points to edit, because the authors wouldn't know what is great about it and what should they keep. And I can tell you, I've once had 20 pages of peer review, and I had no idea where to start and where to end. So be very specific. Explain what the manuscript does well so that they can retain it, and indicate how the manuscript advances the field, or if it does, it could advance the field, there's a potential, but then the authors haven't capitalized on that. Say that as well. Avoid any confusion to authors about what needs revision or even deletion. Next, please. So provide constructive feedback like a coach, because our goal is to nurture scholarship and enhance the manuscript quality. Sometimes, of course, you have to reject, the manuscript just doesn't meet the standards of scholarship, but most of the time there is a kernel, there is something there that's of value. So do not criticize, do not showcase or exaggerate your own expertise, especially not say, oh, all of these papers that I wrote have not been cited. That would be a big error. Have a conversation with a colleague that you can run it by somebody to say, am I actually providing the right constructive feedback? Respect our author's hard work and show interest in their development as scholars. Sometimes my language would be, I have been taught, and I have, in the past, I have learned from, and therefore I am recommending this, and then give a reference if it's appropriate. Next, please. Maintain confidentiality. Do not go around tom-tomming or sharing unpublished work. Do not, if you think an article is heading for rejection, for example, do not plagiarize their ideas, and do not disseminate your criticism of somebody else's work. Next, please. Assess your skills as a peer reviewer. We all start at some point, and we don't just develop these skills overnight. So talk to some of our colleagues, senior colleagues who've been a peer reviewer for longer than us. Ask the editor or associate editor for input on your review. I think many of the journals now have, when it comes back to the associate editors, I'm one of the associate editors, we actually have to rate the review. And ask an experienced colleague for feedback on your language, and read through the peer review result emails. Next, please. Ensure appropriate alignment and scope. What I mean by this is, there may be a tiny, tiny educational intervention, which is important, which is useful, which adds value. But then we shouldn't go around, the author shouldn't go around saying, because of this, I have eradicated global poverty. And the environment has been completely rejuvenated by one little educational intervention. It happens. So the authors should not exaggerate the results. That the impact should be consistent with the intervention. But as peer reviewers, we have to be respectful in conveying that message. Determine whether terminology is used wrongly, and this particularly happens in qualitative research methodology, which not a lot of people are familiar with, and the words like saturation, grounded theory, inductive approach, a lot of words are strung together, and again, respectfully state that this is not appropriate. Communicate to authors that small impact and negative results also add value. So let them not exaggerate. So this is what we mean by scope. Next, please. I think I'm done with the tips.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Subha. Before we quickly move forward, do we have just one thought from the 7 tips which were suggested? Anyone having a burning comment that they'd like to share with us today or thought?
Hi, this is Francisca.
Hi, Francisca.
Hey. Yeah, so many points that were mentioned, I actually recognize that, they have happened. I think some of those have happened to all of us, which, but what the question that I had is, what if the review that you provided differs significantly from the review that another peer reviewer provided? Obviously, that is part of the game. But I always wonder, how can we grow as peer reviewers? And it's certainly is there a question, did I miss something? Or is it okay to be, diverse in opinions about papers? That would be my thought.
I think that's a really good question and a really important question. I'm sure Subha has a thought as well. Big picture is this really does bring together the ideas of multiple people. And we sort of talked about this a little bit in that first session, which is, if Subha's a peer reviewer and I'm a peer reviewer and Ed's a peer reviewer and Eric is the editor, bringing together all those 4 opinions to come together with one coherent recommendation to the authors about how they can improve the manuscript, regardless of whether that manuscript is published in that journal. So we all come at these things with a different viewpoint and a different orientation. Now, if yours is completely off from everyone else's, that may be a sign that you want to think about, what did you see differently? Or maybe what don't you know that they took into account that you didn't? Subha, thoughts?
Yeah, I actually want to invite Ed and Eric into this conversation because they've been doing this. They're seasoned pros at this as well. Ed, would you like to add something?
Ed, you're muted.
Many, if not most of the journals, once a paper is reviewed, if you've reviewed it, will send you the reviews of the other 2 or however many reviewers. So it pays to take a look at what you said and what they said and to learn from them. You may feel that you noticed things that they didn't and feel very good about yourself. You may find that you agreed. You may find that you disagreed. But there are often perspectives that other people bring that allow you to say, oh, I never thought of the paper from that vantage point. And you learn about the value of seeing things from multiple perspectives. And you get that when you get the reviews of other reviewers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Eric?
I would just echo everything that's said, which is it's not in any way necessarily negative if you have discordant reviews or if you're discordant from another reviewer, nor does it make one of them right and one wrong. And as was saying, and Kristina, it really is just differing perspectives, differing geography at times from where you kind of see the world, things like that. So as long as your kind of review is, I think, grounded and logical and you're asking the right questions, it's really considered valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. As long as your goal in sending your review is to enhance the quality of the scholarship and not to criticize the authors. And the other thing it can do is it can actually write to the associate editors or editors for their own feedback. Many of them are excellent at responding to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Francisco, for that meaningful question. We will have time at the end for more questions. What we're going to do now is move into a small group discussion portion. We're going to have 4 groups. Subha is in the background group. I'm in the approach group. Eric is in the evaluation group, and Ed is in the implications group. And these are the 4 main sections of the manuscript. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask each group to focus on your assigned portion of the manuscript, as well as the assigned tip. So one of the 7 tips has also been assigned to you. And then once you've had a chance to read the 1 page, go ahead and develop about a 3-sentence recommendation to the authors for how they could improve. Assign a reporter, and then in 20 minutes, we will rejoin and have some report out. Does everyone understand the task at hand? Any questions about what we're doing in small groups? All right, Caitlin, can you go ahead and open the rooms for us? And we'll be back here in 20 minutes for report out. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. All right, I think we're all here. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you so much for taking time to do that and work through that process. I hope that felt okay to everybody. I know my group had some really fantastic discussion. I think we all grew a little bit, so that's really exciting. Let's go ahead and start with group number 1. That was the group that Subha was in, and your group had the background section. And the tip that we had for you was to acknowledge your own biases and review with a natural eye. So who was your group's reporter, Subha?
Aline from Lebanon.
Aline, hi Aline, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, very good. And so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, likewise.
Yes, fantastic. So what were your recommendations to the authors? Tell us a little bit about what you read and what the authors were.
Yes, we read about the initiation of a Word Cafe format by the Brigham Institute because of the COVID-19 and virtual, and how to share knowledge and connect diverse participants. And we had a fruitful discussion. We came up with 3 points. The first one was to emphasize the problem statement, and probably to move it in the beginning of the statement, which is better, and explain it thoroughly. The second one was there was a gap that was not addressed properly in detail. The third one is what led the institution to initiate this. The hook was there, but they mentioned if this was actually used in healthcare setting. These were the main points that we actually discussed. I don't know if I missed anything. We mentioned that in order to identify the problem statement, we should look for sentences that start with yet, however, but.
Okay, I
agree.
Anyone would like to add anything? If I missed any to mention anything?
No, I love this. I think these are fantastic. So really making very clear what is the problem that this entire work was intended to address, making that very clear to the reader early on. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. The gap, as Subha pointed out in the chat, is that the literature surrounding the study of the World Cafe could have been described more in detail. And I think this points a little bit to, a reminder that when you're drafting a manuscript for publication, really trying to make sure that you've done your due diligence to understand what's in the prior literature so that you can make an adequate case for why your study is needed to address that problem. And then the hook, I will admit to struggling a little bit with the problem gap hook framework. They feel so integrated to me. But what really encouraged this? What spurred this? That sort of thing. So I love all of these recommendations, and I think just me knowing the background section, I think you're pretty spot on. Subha, any thoughts here?
No, I think Aline covered it quite well. And so I told them at the back end, we'll show you a couple of comments from the actual reviewers. I was just going to write one more thing in the chat, which is reviewers may be unfamiliar with an approach or a research methodology, and sometimes need to go back and read some of the literature before posing a review.
Absolutely. And so we'll go ahead and move on to group number 2 at this time. I was in group number 2, and our reporter is Sue. Sue, what did your group come up with?
So we had 4 strengths because we're all overachievers. But the first strength was that we used the SMART framework, which is specific, measurable, actionable, relevant and timely. And second of all, we used various modes for evaluating the data and bringing it all together in the article. The author did, rather. The third recommendation was that we did include information about the IRB, but we need to clarify a little bit more how we achieved confidentiality in the article or in the study. And then we wanted more clarification in the approach as to why we chose Zoom as our method of delivery, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for that. So I think this group in particular pointed out, with a focus on those strengths, what was done well, right? The authors very clearly used the SMART framework in developing their objectives and making very clear what the participants were intended to learn. They triangulated a number of pieces of data to try to tell a story about what they would find. This group did feel that we needed a little more in IRB, that we needed to make that a little more clear and talk about confidentiality. So those were a couple of big picture things from that group. Subha, before we move forward, any other thoughts about those recommendations?
Yeah, spot on.
Pretty spot on, absolutely. We'll move to group number 3, and I believe this was Eric's group, and his tip was to ensure alignment and scope. Who was the reporter for Eric's group?
Yes, so I was the reporter.
Welcome. Hi, thank you.
So hello everyone, my name is Vangelis. So we discussed about the evaluation of the paper. It's the manuscript sparked our interest. So basically we had a table that presented 4 key themes with the appropriate descriptions and 1 representative quote. So we said that we discussed more about the qualitative descriptions and the depth of the qualitative process that the authors followed. We said that they only provided 1 quote, which is not enough to give a clear representation of the messages that the authors wanted to pass. So we would like the authors to include at least 2. Then we also want them to highlight if quotes come from different participants, and also mention the report of the quotes that support a particular theme, that will give a sense of the weight of each theme. And also mention some quotes that maybe contradict the theme if they have received any. In the end, the authors, they also mentioned that they have received some comments for improvement of the sessions that I evaluated, but they didn't go into any detail about them that might show a little bit bias. So we would like them to expand on that a little bit. And also they made a mention about Twitter discussions happening between the sessions. So we would also want them to give a little bit more explanations about this, so we can understand if what the process is. But in general, we think it was really nice written.
Wow, fantastic. I'm loving these comments. I'm picking up on the big picture that you felt that almost the reporting of the evaluation section was just a little bit insufficient, that maybe we didn't have enough evidence in support of what we were saying about our initiative, and that could have been improved with a little bit more description, a few more quotes, and maybe just being clear that we didn't potentially always find positive in support, that maybe we may have found some negative outcomes as well. Subha, any thoughts before we move on? Nope. Fantastic. Thank you. That was wonderful. And moving on to the 4th group is Ed's group, the implication section. And his tip was to provide constructive feedback like a coach to enhance manuscript quality. Ed, who was your group's reporter?
Dzara was our reporter.
Zora, where are you?
Hi, so my name is Dzara Kikinis. I am in Boston. I am local.
I'm glad to see you here. Very nice to see you again. What did your group discuss?
So we really like the part of the article. I think it would be kind of nice to know more, to read more of the article, but we kind of assume that it's been kind of the ending part when things are being summarized. And but nevertheless, we felt we have 3 suggestions. So the one would be when the authors speak about virtual cafe, we would like to know a little bit more about how they achieved it, whether they're using Zoom, whether they're using what kind of media did they use. And we're also wondering, why did it happen during the COVID time that this global interaction might have appeared? Was it really COVID? Was it more the technical advance that has been done with the softwares? Maybe it has been explained earlier, we don't know, but it would be kind of nice to have more information on this. We would also like to know more about the psychological safety that has been mentioned. It would be good to know how it's going to what the ways are to achieve this safety. Is it the implication? Is it the limitation? It would be kind of nice to have a more statement about this. And then the last point we felt like the word, the single word, decolonization is a little bit a strong, decolonization is kind of a strong word. It's a little bit emotionally loaded. I think for the West, they say Western world, and I don't know, maybe the Eastern world. I don't know. I think that part what might be maybe rewarded. We didn't have really time to find out how to reward it in a correct way, but
Thank you so much. That was a very robust report out. Yeah, I think some of these things may have been answered in the first section or the second session, and so part of it is when you review, do read the full manuscript. I know that wasn't the point of this, but maybe we do something where we circle back and sort of remind why this happened in COVID time, why we chose this technology. And I will say that that's something that also came up in my group. I agree. I think a little more about how that psychological safety was achieved, in part so that it could be replicated by future people, right? Somebody may want to try this in their own setting. And so if they aren't able to replicate that psychological safety, then the initiative is not likely to be nearly as successful in their setting. And then the word decolonialization. I am not as up to date on the terminology as Subha is. Subha, any thoughts there?
Sure. So this is actually a term that is being increasingly used because traditionally, a lot of principles in health professions education have been Western concepts that have been generally applied in non-Western settings without necessarily studying or exploring whether the context suits, what's being applied. So that was one of the goals. And in fact, you're absolutely right. Everyone was given excerpts. And one of the goals was bring multiple people from multiple countries together, but then give and take. So people shared their thoughts. It wasn't like we from the Brigham are telling you what to do, but actually, what did you do? And can you tell us how you overcame this? It really was an even conversation. And if you attend the one that's coming up, you will find exactly that.
Thank you, Subha. A good reminder that we have a global cafe coming up and that everyone is welcome. So why don't we go ahead and move forward to the part where Subha will reveal to us what our actual peer reviewers said and how we responded to these peer reviews. And we'll think a little bit about how what our work we did today aligned. So Subha.
So we just giving you one comment for each section. So one of the big reviewer comments was, each of the paragraphs seems so disjointed, it's not telling us a nice, smooth story. So then our response was we significantly edited. They actually wanted a little more about the communities of practice theory, the theory on which it was based. So we did that. And then each paragraph was linked to the upcoming paragraph. Next, please. And then in terms of the approach, it's exactly, I think some of you brought it up. What were the details? They wanted the detail. And so we offered more detail. But one of the, I must acknowledge one thing, the reviewers also thought this was a research paper. This was not a research paper, and they were critiquing it based on research principles. This was more of an innovation description with a brief evaluation. And luckily for us, the editor and associate editor recognized that the reviewers were giving the wrong comments, and they actually said, this is beyond the scope of your paper, but instead provided more detailed description of the innovation, which we did. And this is the language that, the language I've been taught to use to peer reviewers. Never say no, always say it like you're doing exactly what they're saying. And I'm so sorry this couldn't be done, but in the next iteration, I'm going to do this. So next one. Next slide, please. And then in terms of evaluation, they did want some more detail, which we did. And then, for example, we didn't know how many completed surveys, who were they? And we said we did not collect. That was the whole point about psychological safety. We weren't trying to identify them so that they could share their successes and challenges. And we said that. And some of the reviewers' comments, we said they are useful and we'll keep these in mind, although we don't have this information. Okay, the last, next slide. Implications. Now, this particular format of innovations and implementation, implications, because this is an international journal, they want implications for you locally, but you want implications around the world for other educators. So approach and implications are two of the most important sections for this particular format. And we completely revised this because we did not do anything they asked for in the original manuscript. So we changed it and said, based on these results, how did we change our own approach? However, what are the lessons learned for people who may want to implement such a World Cafe anywhere? Low cost, just a matter of sharing ideas. Psychological safety came back into the picture there. They're saying, unless the moderators establish psychological safety, you won't have free and honest conversations amongst people from different parts of the world. So next slide. This is it. And it was published.
And so here we have the big reveal that this is a real paper. This is a BEI paper. You can see these BEI authors on this paper. This is what we did. We took our Global Meta Cafe. We did what you read in those 4 pieces that you went through today. And many of the things that you brought up, as you can see, aligned with what our actual reviewers said. And so, thanks to especially Subha's leadership as senior author, we were able to make a pretty substantive amount of revisions to meet the reviewers' need and get this paper published in the Clinical Teacher. And so this is something we're very proud of, but also did use as an opportunity today for us all to think about what a manuscript might look like at the point when you need to make those revisions. And so hopefully we all had a little bit of growth today and a little bit of opportunity to really think about that process as a peer reviewer. And so with that, we're going to thank you today. This is a link to the BEI peer review bundle that I prepared. We shared it in our last session, but we'll share it in this session to give you some resources to be an effective peer reviewer and continue growing. I know we have just a minute left, but maybe we can take just 1 or 2 questions. Thank you, everybody. Anyone have any question or comment today?
Comments are fine too.
Comments are fine too.
That was really fun. It's also fun to see how we thought differently about it in our group than from even what the other reviewers thought about. So speaking to a little bit the question that was brought up earlier, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all approach things a little bit differently. And so there's never one clear way. This is a point that Deb, who was a part of our first session, brought up, is that it's really about that bringing together the opinions of the different reviewers and the editors. It's never about what one person says about the manuscript. It's about the aggregate, which should take some of that weight of being a peer reviewer off of us, because it's not our opinions that are going to make the decision for the author. It's the aggregate. Thank you, Eric. Other thoughts? Vagelis, did you have a thought? I thought I saw you unmuted.
No, I just wrote it. It was really nice. Thank you very much.
Oh, very helpful. You are very welcome, and we're so glad you came. It is 1:30, so we'll go ahead and conclude unless anyone has one final burning question or comment. Well, just a thank you to all of those. Thank you, Zora. Appreciate that. Thank you to all of those who are authors on the paper for letting us share this work with you today and do a little bit of formative feedback on it. And thank you to those who helped in the breakout rooms and the reporters. And with that, everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.